and kia ora, good afternoon, and welcome to today's Order Paper Urgency Show. And Eric, somehow you managed to come in literally on live time because we're wondering what happened to you.
Oh, just trying to get the coffee ready.
Oh, fair enough. Fair. Oh, yes,
Eric is never late. And Eric is never late. He always arrives on time. He's like Gandalf, you know. He just arrives when he's expected to arrive.
Yeah. And thank you for filling in. For those who are wondering, the original person who was actually meant to be in today was Ian Sinclair, but he got offered a paid live streaming gig. And as I always say, take the money. Yeah, so for wondering why we've got an urgency special, ironically in a recessed week, it gets a bit interesting. So on Wednesday, when I sent out the polls for the 8 p.m. show tonight, there were no select committee hearings that were public. And then on Friday, a sneaky one called the Crown Minerals Amendment Bill, select committee hearings sat there and took place. And oh my God, there are some very good things, including we have our light-hearted clip.
What's that about?
Oh, you'll have to wait. You'll actually quite like the end of it. It's quite fitting. So, yeah, should we kick off with our first... Eric, I think this is the first time you've done select committees on our show. But so we'll be covering submissions going through the select committees, right, and going to work out, you know what the questions are, what these submissions are, and a little bit of commentary on there, and hearing what the MPs actually ask as questions, if they ask any.
Okay. Well, if I come down to Wellington, I'll definitely catch up with you guys. We have a nice meal somewhere, and we go to some...
You're keen to drive over the Remedials, Laura?
Yeah. I'm all good to.
I think Base and Noodle House might sit there and work because they also serve up vegan food.
Yes, you go to a very green place.
There is a good cafe in Newtown that is definitely vegan friendly that I can mention if it was for lunch.
Indian vegan curries now, or?
I'm not vegan.
Okay, same here.
No. I do like vegan food, though. Okay, so let's kick off with our first submission. Now, from what I gather on here, it's a guy called Ben Neville, but to be honest, Vimeo transcribing is absolutely garbage.
Questions from members, if that's okay with you. Thank you.
Okay, so can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can see you, but we can't hear you, okay?
You can't hear me. Can you hear anything?
We can hear a little bit. I think there is a bit of wind or something like that.
He's got leftist audio problems.
Oh yes, Murphy's Law.
Is that any better?
Definitely better. Much better.
Okay, thank you. Right, hello. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. My name is Ben Neville, and I am coming to you from Dunedin. I know that Parliament is sovereign and that it can legally pass this bill into law. I know that the Select Committee process pays little attention to submitters who simply say this law should not be passed. I know that this is a political decision to pass this bill into law and not a legal one. But as politicians, I ask you to consider why is short-term economic benefit of further oil and gas exploration more important than long-term protection from ecological and societal collapse? Who are you benefiting in the political choices you are making? Not me and my neighbours here in Dunedin, where we are currently experiencing a flood caused by the continued problems of climate change. A transition away from greenhouse gas economy has to happen at some point in time. The longer we leave it, the worse for everyone, worse socially and worse economically. So why are you delaying this inevitable transition? The positive impact, the economic impact of oil and gas exploration quickly evaporates when the economy and people's lives are destroyed by these ever more frequent events, such as that which we're experiencing right now in Dunedin. What are you doing? Whose interests are you serving? Where is your leadership? I want to now quote, if you would not mind, from the recent Supreme Court decision in Smith and Frontiera, the decision of 5 eminent judges in New Zealand who, in my submission, deserve the highest respect. This is what they said. The following points can be taken as common ground or indisputable. Climate change threatens human well-being and planetary health. The window of opportunity to ensure a livable and sustainable future for all is rapidly closing. The choices made and actions implemented in this decade will have impacts both now and for thousands of years. This is our Supreme Court justices. The evidence, they say, is unequivocal that humans have warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land, principally through the emission of greenhouse gases. Widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere and biosphere have already occurred. Human-caused climate change is already affecting climate and weather extremes in every region in the world, including my own region. They go on. Many of the impacts of warming fall disproportionately on the poor and vulnerable. This is South Dunedin, where a lot of poor and vulnerable people live, and I would like to ask the politicians what they are doing to protect the poor and vulnerable in my community. Further, the justices of the Supreme Court continue, citing the IPCC report. Cryosphere-related changes in floods, landscapes and water availability have the potential to lead to severe consequences for people, infrastructure and the economy. If this bill is driven by a desire to improve the economy of New Zealand, it is not going to work if it's going to help continue effects like this, which have enormous negative economic consequences. The Supreme Court justices continue. Moreover, as the planet continues to warm, climate change risks will become increasingly complex and more difficult to manage. For that reason, they will become more economically unaffordable for New Zealand. This bill is going backwards, not only in relation to climate change, but in relation to economic benefits for New Zealand. Limiting human-caused global warming requires net zero CO2 emissions combined with strong reductions in other greenhouse gas emissions. Supreme Court justices continue. All global modelling pathways that involve limiting warming to 1.5 degrees involve rapid and deep, and in most cases immediate greenhouse gas emission reductions in all sectors this decade. This is strong words from our highest court, and I would like to ask the politicians in New Zealand to listen to what the Supreme Court justices have said, listen to what the scientists say, and really reconsider who they are acting for and what kind of leadership they are showing in continuing with an act that ignores the impacts that are occurring to me and my community and my friends here right now in Dunedin. I'm just going to, you can finish this submission at any time you want from now on.
Politician, can you make a right decision for all of us? For all of us. Politician.
All right, Ben,
can you make a right decision for all of us? Yeah. For all of us. Politician. Can you make a right decision for all of us? Yeah. For all of us.
Thank you, Ben.
Like a king, man. What a badass.
There is some light-hearted relief to start off the show.
I was howling with laughter when I saw the end of that submission. I was like, oh my God. And no, I'm not going to grab the guitar and start playing. But that was good.
You play music too? What kind
even on a race this week, we've managed to get a light-hearted start off for the show.
Okay, maybe I'll start it off with not a right-wing rant, but thinking in support of the environment in the sense and jobs that, yes, I saw that cheeky a post on Shane Jones of his shift of grief to the right. But my point here would be that, if we have more and more jobs, right, created for more and more mining, with the proviso of maintaining health and safety environment standards, as can be seen in countries with a lot of mining, like Australia, where I think mining a very important mineral. I can't remember off the top of my head, but can you remember the one where in every mobile phone you need to have
lithium? It will be lithium for batteries.
Yes. And apparently, like, they make heaps of money, heaps of rural locals and regional locals, most of them are working class that tend to work your side of the equation. They are the ones benefiting from the jobs, and it's not in the 19th century, mining situation.
Yeah, but we don't have any lithium mines in New Zealand, Eric.
I mean, there's lithium in New Zealand, but the problem is that, a lot of these companies are not government-owned entities. They're private companies. They are profiting off New Zealand assets.
So can we be smart to make money together with them, like have a statutory...
Well, we could charge royalties, but the problem is, I do remember the last lot of attempts to do with oil drilling.
Yep.
They literally, the royalties was based on the profits, not on what comes out the ground.
Have you looked at the Tui project, Eric?
Yes. Did it harm our environment? I mean, well, I'm not understanding of harming the environment. Yeah, like there are some countries, I won't mention the names, in Asia where they have unbridled development, and then they keep building on the hills, the hills, and without proper vegetation of the trees to hold, and then the rain comes, the whole apartment collapses. I won't mention names, there are many countries. But I mean, is ours like that? I mean, I'm asking a question, not being...
A lot of our mining, should we say, historically, and I'd say that pre-2000, have been basically, it's been coal or there's been natural gas. I don't really think there's been much oil. I do know we had a huge natural gas discovery in the late 60s that led to the boom on LPG, including during the Carlist Day eras of the late 70s. The government was actually would give you money to convert your car to LPG. And I mean, LPG burns cleaner than petrol for the same job. So in that aspect, but in the other aspect, you still got to, take out a lot of CO2 goes into the atmosphere in order to bring that stuff out of the ground. But I mean, it's the question of out there is like, we had no new gas deposits or oil deposits that have been found since the big one in 2000.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and on average, it takes about 16 years from granting of the permit to becoming commercially viable. So it's a very long time. If we sit there and issue permits out now, by the time they become commercially viable, it'll be 2040.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the Lake Onslow project was projected to come online sooner than 2040. I think it was like 25 or 2030, around about that time. And that was going to store about 5 terawatts worth of energy, which would be fantastic for our green tech sector.
Yeah, and if you heard with Troy Mihaka last Sunday, he also said the fact is we can drill all this stuff out of the ground, but how do we process it if we haven't got the equipment to process all this volumes of product? So what are we going to do? Export it or burn it up in the atmosphere with no production?
Well,
and I mean that's a common thing from the Methanex factory in Waitara is the fact that when there is excess gas, they often, and can't store it, they often burn it into the atmosphere.
Well, we could create added value by having the necessary get investors to invest in the very thing that you say that, okay, we have the raw materials, but we can't process it. I'm sure there would be interested parties to to do so.
I mean, a great example is bringing in there. We've probably got enough coal to send 20 coal trains to Huntly Power Plant per day, but we might not be able to process one train of coal to process power at Huntly.
I see.
That might be a good way of describing what, like that's where we're at, that situation of we could send 20 coal trains to Huntly Power Plant, but we've only got the ability to process, say, one coal train a day, if that. Well, that's if it's at maximum capacity. But, I mean, the thing is, only one of the boilers are actively running most of the time anyway, not all three of them. I think there's 3, or is there 4 in Huntly? I don't know. Yeah. I know that there was a brownout about 2 years ago, and it was associated with the lack of notice to fire up the boiler. It needed 24 hours notice, and it got 12.
But if you look into the fact that, for example, Laura, you mentioned a good point that it's going to be like 10 years. I mean, like 2030 onwards, that some project will really get into the pipeline. Before that, there's lots of exploration, blah, blah. But the exploration phase itself create jobs. And
it creates jobs for a certain demographic of people. You'd be better off investing into green tech developments, which could come online sooner and employ more people.
Such as Laura,
wind and solar. As I stated before, Lake Onslow was projected to come online.
I think there's about 10 wind farm consents for wind farms to be built in New Zealand that have been granted, but the power generators have not actually started building them.
Right.
So, and that can be like that. They've got nothing stopping them in the way. Once they've been given the consent, you've got 10 years to act on it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can, did you watch the recent Blue Greens national launch on their green policy on Hauraki Gulf to preserve the marine reserves and all that, and the electric boats that the Honourable Simon Watts showed in, we have a Kiwi, born and bred Kiwi company that makes electric boats, which saves, the methane gas emissions into the environment. So, we can't have that simultaneously. We need
to get moving.
I'll say now, fossil fuels are still really important for our economy, but we need to start taking practical steps towards transitioning, right? I'm not ignoring or downplaying the impact that fossil fuels has had on our economy, but it's time to start turning a page and start transitioning where it is practical to do so.
That's exactly what the national environmental policy is about, the Blue-Greens policy, which actually...
I don't think the Blue-Greens policy was mentioned in any of these submissions.
I haven't got a problem with the Blue-Greens. I got a problem with the people that are currently in Parliament who are representing them. The
Blue-Greens, a lot of things under urgency.
And
put it this way, if Labour was doing it, I'd still be hidden out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, I know people who are associated with the Blue-Greens. They're great people. They care about the environment.
We've got this next submission has literally hit on the point that we've just discussed on here. So let's see what Robert Heads has to say, because that's actually quite a good submission on what.
But will you walk the walk, and will you bring us
I have to be honest, I do think there was a bit of the day submission had to be.
Do we have Robert Hill?
You can talk the talk, but will you...
Robert, thank you so much for your submission. We have 5 minutes for your oral submission. You can speak to your submission, and if there is any time left, there might be questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you. No music for me. Kia ora. Ko Robert Hales Tukuinga. I'm submitting as a personal view here as a member of the public, although I am a chartered chemical and process engineer with some understanding of energy systems and such like. I'm not against any particular energy source. We will continue to need a mix of them, particularly through transition to a lower energy economy. there's likely justification for having our own fossil fuel extraction from an energy security point of view, but we don't currently have the ability to process it. By the time we found and built the required facilities, then we will still be in the transition to a lower emission economy. If that's the reason for our exploration, then how it fits into a long-term energy transformation plan should be transparent and well communicated. How much will we need of these fossil fuels, and how long for, and what for? These are energy sources of the past century and will contribute further towards climate change, which is already costing us dearly. New Zealand's global reputation and brand is partly to do with our high proportion of sustainable energy sources. This has value in terms of how we're seen in the world, and we should enhance, not undermine it, by appearing to have a fossil fuel focus. We should be investing in energy sources of the future, like solar and wind, and if we do this beyond the capacity we currently have and we currently need for ourselves, then given our abundance of water, as was aptly illustrated by the previous submitter, we could use this excess of water to create hydrogen, which is a fuel of the future and which could transform our economy as an export product. And you never know where we might end up in terms of a comparison with Saudi Arabia or whatever else, if we could really get behind hydrogen as an export product. That's the end of my representation of my submission. Happy to take questions.
Good, thank you so much. We have some questions. Steve Eber.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Robert. I'm disappointed you don't have music, however, the bar has been set. The question I've got for you is, you spoke about the idea of New Zealand as a renewable energy reputational country, and one that has an opportunity to develop and be a genuine contributor to the challenge the whole world faces in decarbonising.
Yeah.
What is the risk to that if we sort of have an everything soup, as this government does, of wanting to do oil, gas and coal, to be clear, as well as they say they want to double renewables? But that just sends a message of saying we don't have an energy plan. We're just kind of going to say yes to everything and fast track a bunch of things that are really going against what the planet needs to do in terms of decarbonising.
Well, as I said in what I spoke to, we do need a mix, and we have to recognise that our current industry and probably military, from a defence point of view, do need fossil fuels as a fuel supply, and we've seen the impact of businesses closing because energy costs are too high. So, managing that transition is important. I think there will need to be a mix for a period of time, but I don't feel like it's transparent as to how long it will take to find any oil and gas, how we would then produce facilities to refine it and to use it locally, how that will actually be secure from a global point of view, what companies we would allow to do it if we're talking global security and maintaining supply for our own purposes in times of challenging conflict or whatever else. So I think how we communicate this is important, and going through a process like this very quickly doesn't help with that communication and that sharing of a plan. So you can see what happened in Ukraine and the issues of Russia turning off the gas for Europe and whatever else. There are risks when it comes to instability, and we clearly need a way to manage those. But I'm just not clear on how this fits in with that sort of strategy and plan from what I've seen shared to date.
And just for clarity, do you don't support the resumption of oil and gas exploration? Is that correct?
I'm to be persuaded. I mean, to support it fully, it has to be explained, and so I feel like without a more detailed justification of why it is to do with energy security, rather than just chasing after a fuel source that's of the last century and looking to profit off that, I don't think that's a good reason. And I think by the time you found it, actually the market for it will have declined and it will be of less value.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, Robert. Thank you so much for your submission.
Out of all the submissions I watched, Robert is actually one of my favorites because he does explain the need for fossil fuels in playing a key role and transitioning over to green energy and how it's very important for our energy security. But he also highlights hydrogen, which is really exciting because that's a growing market. And I keep batting on about Lake Onslow, but the biggest expense in producing hydrogen is electricity. And Lake Onslow would have stored 5 terawatt hours of electricity. And that would have helped with a lot of issues in regards to hydrogen production, because green hydrogen is growing in demand compared to grey hydrogen, which is produced using fossil fuels.
Well, what you say actually strikes a point there, Laura, and I think Sam also probably shared the same views on increasing our environmental standards, and there's some very good policies on the green side. And in terms of the key thing, I think is the perceptive bias that we have perhaps created for ourselves, that mining equals to pollution, equals to anti-environment. And I can tell you, if you've been across the ditch in Australia and have you been to one of those mining places in Kalgoorlie, gold or whatever they're mining, my gosh, you would think, my God, this is a state-of-the-art facility, because it is the mining, pathways and shafts are air-conditioned. I mean, it's like, hey, is this better than even our normal homes?
I mean, they also export a lot of their, Australia exports a lot of their mined minerals resources. And that's something that actually came quite interesting about the Paris Agreement, is when it comes to, say, mining, it doesn't actually take into account of exports. It only takes into account. So I think Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Richard Miles or something, I'll breathe the last name wrong, and someone's probably going to put the correct name in the chat. But he actually mentioned the fact that, for the Paris Accord, the exporting part is not actually part of the Paris Agreement, is exporting those minerals. But the pretense of New Zealand is, we're not drilling it for export, we're drilling it for internal consumption, which then does increase the emissions. Whereas if you export them out, if, say, the coal's burnt in China, it's China's emissions, it's not New Zealand's emissions if New Zealand coal was burnt in China. But that's the thing here is, the difference of what is it going to be? In the case of natural gas, it's a bit hard to export it, unless you've got a pipeline. Yeah. And that was mentioned in there, how that Russia was exporting gas, and then with the Ukraine invasion, how quickly the gas can be turned off and affect, say, Germany.
That you answered the question. That is why the whole purpose of this mining thing is to have energy independence. Now, I know we have fantastic energy sources, like that good bloke was saying. We do have hydro, we do have wind, we do have even volcanic, the steam from the heat.
Geothermal.
Yeah, geothermal. Sorry, that one. Yeah, and we have like so many types of natural resource. We could be exporters of that. I understand. Harness the green side. Now, mining also can be green. Now, you see, you're saying about 15 years of exploration where nothing really is done. But in that 15 years, the money pumped into our country.
I would like to preference that it does depend on what you're mining, though, because there's no point mining for coal if you're not going to pursue green tech. Like mining for copper and lithium is a different issue. I don't have a problem with doing sustainable mining for lithium and copper as long as marine title, customary titles are acknowledged, iwi are acknowledged. I don't have a problem with that partnership there. I don't have a problem with extracting minerals for the purpose of developing green tech. It's about, like you said, it's how we go about it that matters.
It's like the other thing is, do we go back to running steam trains on our train tracks?
Okay, oil and gas. You see, the moment we say mining, what comes into our minds, we can see all the conversation.
We think of coal normally, yes.
Coal. Why are we not thinking of mining other minerals like, lithium and those that do not use so much, that's not create so much.
They have different uses long term, and I like in the case of copper. I mean, that can keep being recycled and reused time and time and time again. I mean, yes, it's not exactly renewable as such, but its use is infinite that you can, melt it down, re-put it back up, and then you can sit there and do it. You can sit there and do it that way. I mean, that's copper.
I would like to preference one point though. The reason why the focus is on petroleum and coal is because the Crown automatically owns that stuff. Iwi owns the other stuff.
Okay.
So that, yeah. So
what the
Crown owns is very important.
Crown and Iwi work together. That's what the treaty of
I 100% agree. Get Crown and Iwi work together. Good.
I mean,
I don't know. People might be against that because they'll see it as co-governance. But yes, you are right. Can they work together? But I can picture equally there will be people who go out there to destroy the relationship because they will see iwi. Oh, that's bad because it's simply the word iwi, or co-governance like there was with Free Waters Reform. Not actually see what the underlying foundations work behind that, such as the Waikato River. There is a trust there that's been a co-government arrangement that has been around since the mid-2000s. But no one seems to talk about that one as being bad because it just flies under the radar because it does nothing wrong and it's productive.
So do you think this kind of, I wouldn't use the word fear-mongering among the left, not that you all created...
I think all sorts of directions do fear-mongering, Eric.
I'm very scary.
It's actually not... I mean, I understand you all truly, sincerely see, oh my God, it's going to be oil and gas and all the smokestacks everywhere. But today it is so advanced that you won't even know a petroleum plant exists next to your home. Really, I mean, it's kind of so processed nowadays. Do you think so? That, I mean, you can have a petroleum plant, well, not literally next to where you're living, but nearby, and you don't have smokestacks everywhere. And so I think sometimes the concerns and the fears...
Well, I mean, we had Marsden Point. That used to make petrol, then the private owners shut it down.
And who shut it down?
The private owners.
Private owners.
A lot of people sit there and go with the Labour government, but it was privately owned and has been privately owned for a very long time. And the shareholders chose to sit there and shut it down rather than spending the money to upgrade it.
I know it's because that time the then Labour government created so many bureaucratic rules and regulations.
Yes, but the bureaucratic rules and regulations have been there for a very long time.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
I mean, operations.
Yeah, it was at a point where it needed a replenishment and a rejuvenization in its production. The other thing is the capacity of it was quite narrow for Marsden Point. It was quite narrow. It wasn't it didn't cover the capacity of what New Zealand used. So that was the other thing with Marsden Point was that you couldn't export the products overseas. Well, the only thing they exported out of there was avgas. Yeah. Everything else was pretty much basically domestic supply. And I mean, the reason for avgas was exported overseas is a lot of the avgas that came out of Marsden Point was sent over to the islands, ironically, probably to sit there and refuel Air New Zealand and Qantas planes.
Okay. Anyway, it's not economical, isn't it? In a nutshell, they closed Marsden
Point. I mean, that's the thing. Marsden Point, whereas the one that really gets me is the fact that Singapore exports petrol. Because Singapore has a refinery, which is where we get most of our petrol, our diesel is from. A lot of it is from the Singapore refinery.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the Australian refineries are only supplying domestically, which are the ones that are closer to New Zealand. So we end up having to get our petroleum products from Singapore.
Yes. So that's maybe why there was this focus now, this current government on having energy independence. Like, okay, no worries.
Muldoon did the same thing. Muldoon was doing the same thing during the 80s with the Think Big projects. That's the reason why we got all the hydro dams. That's the reason why we had Marsden Point built. And I mean, at the time, it met the needs of New Zealand well and truly and available for export. I mean, but we had a third of the population we have now. And then, the privatisation of the 90s led things to sit there and do it. Was it TY Point was another one of building jobs in New Zealand, but TY Point's always been privately owned. It never was a government asset. It was just the government supplied the electricity.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Muldoon, 80% of our energy production is from renewable sources. The problem with carbon emissions in New Zealand, a lot of it comes from transport. So if we can decarbonise that and have enough energy to provide that, awesome. You know, we won't be as affected by carbon tariffs that are coming from the EU.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing we watch. We've got this next one, Veronica someone. This is the annoying thing with Vimeo transcribing. Let's see what Veronica's got to say. She does mention bits about solar.
Sorry, Helen.
Okay, thank you. So next we have is Veronica Kulpan.
Sorry, this does take a little while to get through there because of Vimeo. It's not quite as user-friendly as the Parliament's website, or the one they use in the debating chamber.
Hello, Veronica. Thank you so much for your submission. We have 5 minutes with you. So if there is any time left after you have spoken to your submission, there might be questions from members. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me today. And I was fortunate to catch the tail end of the last submitter, who sounded like he was well across a number of the issues, much more deeply than I am, I have to say. My position on the proposed bill is to object to it in its entirety. I am fundamentally against increasing the amount of our reliance on fossil fuels, and fundamentally against the reopening of otherwise protected areas to further exploration and raiding to generate wealth. Wealth is perhaps a good thing, but raiding and decimating our lands and our seas, and with the risk of contamination, when we should be transitioning and building a plan and putting in place a plan to transition away from our reliance on fossil fuels. There is opportunity, I think, for exploring more in the way of solar and wind, and we've seen such a movement over the last number of years where the technology around those solutions has just come along in leaps and bounds. And there's probably more to explore there. I mean, goodness knows that there really ought to be more to explore there with the great work that researchers and scientists and developers are doing in that space. And it would be fantastic to see some of the opportunities through where we've already got resource consents that have been granted to bolster wind and solar development on a system-wide level, so that the structures are beginning to come online to support a more resilient energy sector and for energy provision for the country. I am very worried about the speed of the process and the chance for people to submit. Now, I appreciate you are all incredibly busy people, but so are we, members of the public, who are losing track of all the very many changes and undermining of democratic conventions and principles, who we've got our day jobs and we're trying to juggle that in our busy lives and attend to Parliament to present on issues that are dear to our heart, but we're also struggling with putting food on the table at times and making sure some of our other commitments are met. And it's great to have the opportunity to speak, but the simple speed of this is very worrying from a democratic position. So I think that partly goes towards concerns around reputation of New Zealand on a global stage. We all know that 100% pure was a fabrication, a lie, but there was still this image that New Zealand was a relatively green country, that we were trying to do our best, even if we were flawed in our responses. Here we have, again, a further eradication of that idea of New Zealand as a green country. And I say green in a very wide sense, not as a political affiliation. We should be transitioning away. We should be putting in place structures and responses that help us to transition away from fossil fuels. And we should be putting in place the structures and maintaining the structures that allow for democratic involvement in processes such as this. So that is essentially my submission, and I'm open to any questions. Please don't ask me a technical question.
Thank you, Veronica, for your submission. And we have a question from Steve Ebel.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. I won't ask you a technical question. And I think the thing you alluded to, I wonder if you can expand on, is the sense of appropriate democratic processes and how that dissuades people from faith in our political processes if a government consistently puts through these highly truncated submission periods, very short hearing periods, only 2 days here, only 4 days, working days for people to make submissions. What effect do you think that has on the wider societal faith in so-called democracy?
Interesting question. I'd take a step back and I would look at where I think urgency has a role. And I think urgency has a role in situations like the Canterbury earthquakes, genuine emergency. It's not just Canterbury earthquakes, of course, the situation unfolding in Dunedin at the moment, if that becomes worse, or what happened in Auckland 18 months ago. I'm not actually entirely sure what the responses there would be, but urgent situations for urgent responses to urgent situations. This is a relatively conventional bill in the sense of it's relatively conventional in the sense of it's making some changes that have a political party in particular has petitioned people on through the election process and the like, without much in the way of meat on the bones of the skeleton of what they were proposing. And we have a process that over decades upon decades, if not centuries, decades upon decades have developed that allows people, and not just people such as myself, who's just Joe Public, right? But has allowed the democratically elected representatives, so on whether they're on the government side of the house or the opposition side of the house, to engage in a proper manner and to have the time to digest what is presented to them, to have time to gather the evidence and form their own views, and to look at what is in the letter of the bill and the law, because that takes careful consideration, care that I have not had chance to fully digest.
Veronica, sorry, I'll have to stop.
Now, just to address Frosty's question, why was there a woman outside on a deck? That's MP Helen White for Mount Albert.
Okay.
She's lounging around on the job. She's working from home. What is she doing?
So, yeah, I thought that might be a good point to actually put up there, is that was Helen White MP, who may not always get a chance to always ask questions.
Right.
But that was an interesting part about saying about the, the constant use of urgency as a standard legislative practice.
That worries me a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, like, the other option, and they've got a tool in the toolbox, it's called extended sitting days. It's another tool. It is effectively urgency, but not urgency, if that makes sense. It just means instead of doing, say, 4 to 6 hours worth of debating in the chamber, it goes up to, I think, 9 to 10 hours.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's you can't skip you can't go through all stages of the bills in one sitting day, because so extended sitting, you can only go through one stage of each step of the bill through the process, whereas urgency, you can go first, second, third reading and committee of the House all in one go, whereas extended sitting means, you finished this stage, it has to be on the order paper before you can actually go forward through on the next day. It's it's a little bit, it has more better checks and balances in place.
My biggest concern around the submission process is that there doesn't appear to be a set minimum amount of time that's acceptable. Like, I would like to see these submissions given a minimum time frame, right? Whether you can take in submissions. I'd like to see that extended to 2 weeks because people are busy. They're living their lives. They don't have time to do big in-depth research into things. And I think it's really important for the government not fast track that.
Yeah, 4 working days is what they were given. And in the case of this, like, the fact is, on Wednesday, we didn't know this select committee process was happening. I found out Friday morning.
Right. Well, could you see also in the sense that the current government is quite a hardworking one? I mean, if you look at the previous 6 years, they were always avoiding going to.
Yes, but they were never going into urgency constantly all the time.
Right.
Urgency, hard, rushed legislation isn't called hard-working legislation. If they wanted to make themselves look hard-working and properly doing it, then they would actually sit down there and use extended sittings instead of urgency. And the fact that they took from the month of May right up until July, they had 1 sitting week. That's not a hard-working government. Whereas if you went for last year, each had the normal sitting weeks that was 3 weeks on, 1 week off, which is the normal parliamentary sitting process. And then when it comes to school holidays, you have 2 weeks off, so you can have your MPs back in their constituency at the same time with the school holidays, so they can actually sit down there and see their constituents while looking after their children, that sort of thing. And also when points where parents and that where they tend to take time off at school holidays to look after the kids in place of paying for childcare. So whereas if this government it's like we're not going to roster anyone onto work, and you're saying, we've all gone to unpaid overtime, and that is not. To me, that is not actually doing things fast. That's doing things higgledy-piggledy, and it's not productive. It's like, you're trying to sit there and land 15 planes at Wellington Airport in a space of 30 minutes. It ain't going to happen with one runway.
I'd like to respond to Eric. Like, of course they're working hard. These are hard-working politicians. I'm not going to deny that they're not working hard. It's really hard work writing legislation.
But what about the labor filibusters? The labor filibusters.
Yeah, I mean,
well, there are so many urgency sittings because of the delays.
Of course, and I have problems with that as well. But hard work should not be done at the cost of democracy.
True,
it's really important that people get to have a say. And you can do hard work, and you can do democratic participation in these bills.
And
I think that's really important.
Most bills, in a traditional sense, get 6 months from going between first reading for the select committee to do a process before second reading. In the case of this bill, it's got to report back to the House on the first sitting day in October, which I think is the 15th. That is a very short time for a very complex piece of legislation that should actually go through the 6-month full select committee process.
I think if I want to look at it this way, there is two valid perspectives, though they can be seen as opposing points. All right, now you have the side where in the rurals and regionals, right, where there are lots of good, hardworking Kiwi, Joe Blocks, and Maori people who are looking for work, and these mining situations, like you see, the so-called good mining, like lithium and all that, less pollution. I mean, if we can find it, hey, we might even find gold again. Well, we'll be very rich again, New Zealand. But hey, it's possible, and it's less pollution like oil and gas. But so we can do it. We have the ability. We can create jobs. So you have this balancing point. On the one hand, you want to create jobs, and so the current government is all about getting jobs and getting people into the jobs, good jobs, Kiwi blokes and all that, right? And Kiwi ladies, all right? So this is a good side of it. Now, then you have the balance with, I know, the idealism of the Greens and those who have very educated, like you guys, who have read like 13 books on health, environment, and preserving that health side. But we are talking all this from Wellington, from our safe caves, whereas these road blocks in Mata, and I was working for 4 years, right, driving a car to all the hinterlands, rurals, and it's so sometimes you can see they are really hard done by. It's like really tough for jobs and that kind of rural environment. So for someone like Shane Jones, he's thinking, okay, I have my constituency and those who support me, I'm there to get jobs for them. So on the one hand, we got to balance with the environment, which the health and safety standards already incorporated into our New Zealand rules and regulations pertaining to mining. I mean, it's not like the usual 18.
Well, they did screw up with Pike River, but that also didn't help when the number of mine inspectors in New Zealand went from 3 down to 1 the year before the Pike River disaster. I mean, I would sit there and say, if we're going to build up more mines and all that, we need to piggyback off our Australian cousins to have them be our mine inspectors, because they've got way more experience than what we have.
They've got stronger unions too.
Yeah, if we were to do more mining, we need to have a system in place where our Australian cousins have bring their inspectors over to check, so we're not having the same Joe Blogg turning up at the place doing the inspections. You want different people there because different people pick up different things. I can tell you that from my business with health inspections. Every time I've had a change in health inspector, they pick up something different in the business. The worst one I had, not really, but was having someone who was a former barista, but with the coffee cup. Because guess what? He knew all the tricks that I knew.
Yeah, I mean, to speak to that, I mean, I have a background in forestry. I'm not some woke greenie sitting up in a white tower somewhere.
Education. You guys.
I mean, I know I can use chainsaw. I mean,
but we can, education. Sometimes you can pontificate, and on the geoblocks and geoblocks in these farming towns that I drove like 1,000 kilometers from Hamilton there, and then I'm going there to ask them, would you like to buy insurance? And my gosh, they're suffering, and you're asking them to
yes.
There's the moral.
I'd like to talk about insurance.
Yeah. So, I mean, the
price of insurance is going up due to climate change. I mean, look at the flooding that's happening in Dunedin, their insurance rates has gone up. I mean, I feel.
Well, we've got that in Wellington. There are some parts of Wellington which
think they need mining jobs, Laura. I mean, they need mining jobs. Don't you think they need mining jobs?
I think, some of them could do mining jobs, but the other thing I'd like to say too is that I think the government can help people get into green tech jobs by providing subsidised education.
Or green
I think
mining
that's also
jobs.
really important.
Well, for the right, if you want
mine
to
in a green way, right? Can we mine in a green way? Can we do mining in a green way? Can we all agree on this? I mean,
I think there are actions that can be taken to make mining more environmentally friendly.
Yes. So we could do that.
It's also what's the product that's coming out of the mining is the big question.
Okay, most of the money
is going to lead.
I need to ask the question. Australia, isn't it? The mining that's coming in will be all the expertise will be from Australia and US. And all the rules.
Well, I mean, you look at their mines. I mean, isn't it? Queensland, their biggest export was coal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was our biggest mineral export. It is, because I remember Troy mentioning a week ago was one particular area that their solar energy uptake on there created so much power that they had to shut off coal-powered power plants in Queensland because there were too much solar going into the grid.
Too much, right. I mean, there are 3 countries that most likely will put money here, right? Canada, Australia, UK, maybe not the expertise. Okay, oil and gas, maybe UK, and then America, United States. So if these 4 people put money in, you can be rest assured they'll follow all the environmental standards. And, it's just like if one bad apple doesn't spoil a whole bunch of apples, right? So you have 50 West Coast mining places, and one fails because it was shoddy. The manager was putting something into his pocket, and then the whole thing crashes. Some miners die, which is sad, unfortunate, and it's wrong. And then we have a royal commission, remember, to look through it. Doesn't mean that all the mining places are like that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, listen. I don't have a problem with people who work in the industry.
Right.
I don't have anything against miners. What I've got against is how does this play when it comes to our emissions budget that we have to meet? How does this play when it comes to carbon tariffs that the EU are putting out? How's that going to impact our economy? So we got to keep all this stuff in mind, and we do need to start taking steps towards transitioning to green tech. I'm not against the miners.
We can't please all the big countries. We got to get our energy independent.
We might not be able to
about pleasing
to those countries.
Okay.
We could lose out on trade with those countries. That's really important because people are not going to buy products if the tariffs are there and causing inflation to go up. We saw the same thing in America, for example. Those costs were transferred over to customers. China wasn't paying for those tariffs, the customers were.
Exactly.
So that's really important to keep in mind.
So who was the smarty who signed off $15 billion from our taxpayer money to give for the emissions of China and India? I think it was Arden, isn't it? We don't have to do that. There was
I'll have to look into that. I'm not
carbon offset.
That doesn't quite.
Let's look into the specifics for that. But
you got to look.
Let's look at Go Well Consulting. This is the first submission that a national member asks a question.
That'd be great. Yeah, kia ora koutou, Cornick Morrison. I'm founding director of Go Well Consulting. We're a full-service sustainability consultancy based here in Tamaki, Makaurau. Our whole purpose is to help businesses evolve for a sustainable future, and by that I mean a circular, regenerative, decarbonised economy. Before I go on any further, I just want to acknowledge the people in Dunedin who right now are living through an extreme weather event that has been made significantly worse due to the increased levels of moisture in our atmosphere that are there because of the increased amount of energy and heat in our atmosphere, which is there because of the greenhouse gases that are in our atmosphere that are increasingly in our atmosphere, and they are increasingly there because of the burning of fossil fuels. Precisely what this government and MPs here on this call are proposing to do. So just want to front this by saying all those who are voting in favour of this bill are proactively and deliberately adding to that problem by putting what would be significantly more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And it is very much agreed within the climate science world and sustainability world, and in the world that I operate within, that to achieve our climate goals and stay under that 1.5 degrees of warming, which is this critical tipping point where we get runaway climate change from these feedback loops, to stay under that 1.5 degrees, we can't develop any new fossil fuel fields. And so that's really clear. And so again, to make that underline that point again, those who agree to put forward this bill and make this change, they are flying in the face of that really clear climate science, and will have to live with that, I guess, and sit on that side of history. So just sort of want to start by saying that. I also just want to say, with all due respect to those of you on this call and have made time to be here, this feels like a colossal waste of time, considering the rhetoric of the minister and what seems very clear what they are wanting to do. And I've listened to a couple of presentations already that have also highlighted how frustrated we feel as a public who have been very much shut out of this democratic process. So that feels extremely frustrating, and I think that point's been well made by others as well. But hey, I do thank you that I've got this time, and I will take this very short snippet to try and perhaps influence one or two people to change their minds or vote differently. Our presentation, our submission, again, due to the very short time frame to put submissions in, it was pretty short and pretty focused on the impact this will have on the New Zealand global brand. So we work with we've worked with hundreds of businesses across dozens of industries. We're all facing these same problems. We all have to transform our economic system and our energy system. It's happened before in history. We used to be powered by slaves, and then by animals, and then by wood, and then by fossil fuels, and now we've got another energy transition that's going. That's happening, and for New Zealand to not acknowledge that and to not get on board with that is really damaging to our global brand and to the businesses we work with. Extremely frustrated that they're trying so hard to reduce emissions, yet they are up against real headwinds from global market changes, from consumers looking to buy more locally, really concerned about freight-related emissions. For example, buying a bottle of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc versus something that's produced over in France for someone in the European Union. Some real challenges there, and so our only real strategy in that is that the way we're producing on site or on farm in New Zealand is significantly lower, and I guess forward thinking into that regenerative kind of way of growing our products. There's a bit of research that came out recently by the Aotearoa Circle, and I think it was PwC. Don't quote me on the second author there, but definitely Aotearoa Circle, that showed 80% of New Zealand's exports by value are going to countries that have existing requirements around carbon emissions or pending requirements around that 80% by value. So just trying to really reiterate the damage that you will do to the global brand and what impact that will then have flowing onto our business community and our economy from that point. It just feels like this is not by any means a decision based around science. It's really clear why climate change is happening and what's going to make it worse, and it's really clear the direction that the global markets and economy is going. Feels like this is a doubling down on old, outdated thinking and ideology. So find it hugely frustrating that that's what's happening within our government, when so many in the business community are trying really hard to stand up to these really complex and challenging problems, right? That's pretty much all I wanted to say, really. I might leave it there. I'm getting a bit wound up as well, sorry. So open for questions.
Thank you, Nick. We have some questions here. Steve Abel.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And rightly, you should be getting wound up. A lot of us are wound up about it as well on the committee. And so the question I had for you is just to dig a bit more into that point you made about 80% of our export destinations, is that this is what direction the whole world is going, and we as a nation would like to see ourselves as part of being on the right side of history, part of being in the global challenge of dealing with climate change, which means everyone needs to do their bit. So what do you think, to expand further, is the impact of this action, which really just sends a message to the world that we're departing from the global science, we're departing from that community of action on climate change and joining the fossil fuel retrograde attitudes of the past? With a Victorian era minded Minister of Resources who just wants to send things to extinction and dig up more oil, gas and coal for that matter. Look, big question, Steve. And I'm not in a position to kind of quantify by any kind of monetary value of what the impact would be. Just going back to that article, just quickly brought it back up, that the reports by the Aotearoa Circle and Chapman Tripp. And so, definitely recommend having a look into that report and around the exposure that we have, or our exporters have to these changing trends around the world. Like I say, I can't put any sort of numbers around it, sorry, Steve, right now, but I think it's pretty bloody obvious to anyone who at least works in my space, I guess, that this is absolutely the direction of travel of businesses globally and consumers globally. I mean, the quick example that jumps to mind is the whole situation with Nestle demanding Fonterra sort out their on-farm emissions, right? And so there's a massive global business that's just turned around and made our biggest business suddenly stand up and start sorting out their on-farm emissions. So that's just, I guess, one example, Steve. But that's probably as much as I can do at this stage. That's great. Thank you.
Take more time, maybe.
Thank you. Dan Britwa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Nick, for your submission. Just going to your written submission on your recommendations, I think there's actually, and this is maybe more of a statement than a question, but I agree with your second point around increasing renewable generation. That's this government's plan, is to double that. The third point is around your suggestion around putting Cabinet through some economic and climate science training. I would agree with that, and I'd agree to that across the House. And to your first point around banning oil and gas, I disagree with it. Regardless of what my colleague Steve Abel says, I'm actually very in favour of this as a means for providing us with energy resilience in the future.
Right.
Thanks, Dan. I just want to quickly come back to that, just to make sure you're really comfortable to sign off putting more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, considerably more And considering what's happening in Dunedin right now, considering the amount of weather events that have hit New Zealand recently, the amount of flooding, the damage that it's done to our economy, our people, our livelihoods, you are really comfortable to go ahead and put a green tick on a significant amount of new fossil fuels going into greenhouse gases.
That's a debatable point, Nick, but I appreciate your submission today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Nick, for your submission.
I would have liked to have seen those two debate. That would have been good.
Oh, yes, but your time's expired.
Oh.
Well, I think it's kind of a win-win situation. Like, I understand that we do have a European free trade agreement, and the European Union is very advanced. We doing research with them before. They have the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, even for women and children, European Charter of Rights and Environment. They are very onto it. I mean, even when I did my research for the whole Germany as an independent researcher on hate crime, they were so progressive and still fundamentally conservative. It's very funny mix. And so the point here is that what Dan Vidua makes a point is that you notice he used a very important word: energy resilience, energy independence. We don't want to be like, please, Indonesia, send us the coal. And then Indonesia said, we won't give you the coal unless you give us, you can put 1 million of our people in your country. I mean, not like that. But what I'm trying to say is by having energy independence from all the mining and exploration, we actually control the means of energy so people won't muck us around, won't bully us. So New Zealand is not as small as I always think. I notice a lot of politicians here like to say, we are a small country, we are a small country. Actually, the answer is no. You look at our landmass, we are a big country, we are a great country.
We're a small country by population.
Yes, but we are not going to make New Zealand great again. We are not Trumpian, okay? We are not going to do that. But we're going to say that.
No, we've had our
We already are great.
We are already great. We are already great with our products. We are already great with our green products. We are already great with our fantastic beef, fantastic kiwi fruit, fantastic mineral resources. The key is how to harness this energy, create jobs. Forgive me for using this word that you guys say, make money, which provides for everybody, put bread on the table, and at the same time protect our sovereignty and our national territorial integrity, and have people invest and make money for us and with us. So you see, this is
I just want to make a point to what Frosty said there. On most select committees, you don't tend to have ministers sitting on them. Dan Biduas is an MP.
Yeah, he's not a minister.
He's your local MP, Eric, I think.
Yeah, he's my local MP. I go to a lot of our Super Blues meeting.
He's Eric's local MP and Paul's local MP as well. He is not a minister. And usually on select committees is when you get to see the backbench MPs, not the ministers.
Yes.
Okay, so to address Eric.
And Frosty's now corrected himself. A national member.
He's a national member, not the minister.
If I could address Eric.
Yes, sure.
Okay, energy resilience. Yes, I agree. Very, very important. We're at the bottom of the world. We need all the energy we can get. But I think that because ecologically speaking, we've got a huge amount of natural resources, and thankfully, a lot of them are renewable. So there are steps we can do to expand that, and the green tech industry sector is growing, and it's projected to keep growing. And I think it's really important that we strike the iron while it's hot. There is a lot we can do with that here. I mean, do you know how many countries would kill to have access to the environmental resources that we have?
Exactly.
I mean, we've got a ton of water for starters. We've got lots of wind. I mean, holy crap! I live in Ekatahuna. Huge amounts of wind comes blowing through here, and we're not taking advantage of that. But there are good jobs there that labourers can pick up in the green tech sector. And I'm very keen to support those people as they transition over from, fossil fuel industry over to green tech. I think the government has a responsibility there to help these people get into those jobs.
The only thing is that I think we must be cautious when we come to international agreements, right? Not to be too much of a goody two-shoes. In New Zealand, we have a habit of, we were the first country for women's voting, great. We were the first country for minority representation, great. And then we want to be like the darling country for everybody. But then all the other countries says, yes, we agree with the environment, but we will protect our Australian farmers. And we agree with all this, we will protect our American farmers, our American forestry. We are the only ones that, yes, we will give all the money of ours, $15 billion from our taxpayer for paying off carbon credits on behalf of helping reduce carbon emissions for the world. We are so goody two shoes. Great. But then, hey, that 15 billion could be used for our health.
I agree. Yeah, decarbonising our economy will really help with that. Right, we can save money. We don't have to buy the carbon credits from overseas if we are actively decarbonising. We don't have to do that. We don't have to buy stuff from China.
Yes. Do we have to sign off the dotted line to do it straight away when other countries say, yeah, it's a very good idea. Diplomacy, I'll shake your hands.
Yeah, but the other one is to have a transition plan. Like this.
You have to be smart. We have to protect our.
Yes, we need to be smart.
Yeah. I mean, some of it is planning. Now, I remember in 2020 when Tamatha Paul put out a statement that, as part from, and I can't remember if it was 2025 or 2030, but it was to have no internal combustion engines. Was it inside the CBD limits of the Golden Mile, the areas and all that? And people cried foul because they equated as something happening 10 years down the track as it is on the doorstep tomorrow. Yeah. While she pushed the policy of we're going to ban internal combustion engines in the CBD. If you want to take a vehicle in the CBD, you have an electric vehicle. Here it is, Bidford. Here it is, Gilmore's, for the places doing that. When you look at your plan of new plant and equipment for trucks, look at, say, an electric option or a hybrid option. Don't look at a sole internal combustion engine option. That sort of thing. It gives that message. And some people see that message of, let's start planning ahead. Let's start sending the message. This is what we plan to do. And some people are like, oh, we're going to sit there and stop it. Oh, it's impractical. We're thinking about it tomorrow. We're not thinking about the long term. It's that sort of thing there. And like how people got so enraged and upset because they took something as a long-term decision to send to the trucking industry, send to Greater Wellington Regional Council to tell the bus industry of Wellington to electric buses, which actually Greater Wellington Regional Council has stated that no new bus contracts will be for buses that are diesel. All new bus contracts have to be electric or hydrogen, even that the hydrogen technology ain't at that point yet, but that's what they've said is their standard. People got up in arms because they thought this is coming in tomorrow because they chose not to listen. They chose to take it out of context. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing there. It's like when you're trying to take something as a long-term, let's say this is how we're going to sit there and do things as a long-term plan, and people take that long-term plan as a short-term, short-term, it's going to be happening now.
So it's really important to pair that up with good policy too to help industries transition over to that green tech.
Yeah. Now let's get to here's a submission that's out of whack with everyone else who's been doing it. There's a pro submission to the bill. So let's kick it off.
And if there is time left, there might be questions from members. Thank you.
Certainly. Look, good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I realise it's 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet. Echelon, we are an energy company based in Wellington. We produce hydrocarbons in New Zealand, Australia and Indonesia. I've personally got a degree in petroleum engineering, one in mechanical engineering, and I've also got a degree in business, and I've worked in the oil and gas business for 35 years around the world. On an overarching point, few countries have more renewable electricity in their system than New Zealand. We actually punch well above our weight, and that heavy lifting was done in the 50s, 60s and 70s through hydro and geothermal. Of the countries that have about the same levels of renewable as us, Brazil, Denmark and Norway stand out. All of them have vibrant, export-oriented oil and gas businesses. Our submission looks at the arguments for Indigenous energy production in terms of security, cost and climate. On security, I think you just need to read the paper today and see what a problem it would be to rely on others for energy.
not when it's here for the finding. Wind and solar dominate the renewable growth plans, and for reliability, they just simply need to be backed up. In the submission, we run through the logic. It demonstrates that the only currently viable and cost-effective backup is gas peakers, and that's exactly what we do for a 43% solar-powered Alice Springs with our Dingo gas field. The sun goes down, a battery holds the grid for about 5 minutes. That's what batteries are good for. And gas engines come on to power the grid. Cost matters. New Zealanders need to have a constant supply of energy, but they've also got to be able to afford it. As well as the simple fuel costs, importing energy has a bunch of hidden costs. Imports have to be paid for, and that damages our already negative balance of payments. Taxes and royalties will get paid elsewhere. New Zealanders are going to lose the opportunity to have high-paying, high-tech jobs of all sorts here at home. And finally, the hydrocarbon extraction industry is the world's most productive industry, and a country's productivity determines its standard of living. So if you've got lower productivity, that means you're going to be less well-educated, you're going to be poorer, and you're going to be sicker. Finally, there is no gain for the climate in turning our back on Indigenous resources. We actually use 100,000 barrels a day of oil in New Zealand today. I'm sure Mr. Abels and Ms. Schwabrick will say that the world has discovered enough oil, no need for any more. What they probably won't say is that 3/4 of that discovered oil is in bitumens and oil sands. Those are environmentally harmful and highly energy intensive to mine and process. Offshore fields like the ones we have in New Zealand have a far, far smaller environmental footprint, and they consume far, far less energy to produce per unit of energy. So that's less CO2 per unit of energy. If you look at importing gas, then I challenge you to do the maths. Burning imported LNG is about the same or worse than burning Indonesian coal. And I can assure you we are burning Indonesian coal in New Zealand. We were doing it yesterday. We don't happen to be doing it right at this minute. I just checked. So it requires producing, compressing, liquefying, storing, transporting, storing again, then regasifying. About 25% of the gas is burnt on its way to the user. So that's all ends up as CO2 in the atmosphere, and we do share an atmosphere. It doesn't matter where the CO2 is produced. So we would say that reversing the politically motivated changes that were made previously will begin to restore the trust that's needed to bring investors, to bring capital back into New Zealand. I would also draw your attention to the Energy Resources Aotearoa submission. That has some specific policy recommendations which will further rebuild that trust. And then we can see if New Zealand can use our stores of ancient solar power, because that is what hydrocarbons are, to help ourselves and the world as we navigate the transition. Yeah, it is a transition, not a hard stop. And that is why gas, I believe, is a 3-letter word for transition. So thank you, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Andrew, and we'll go to Steve Abel first.
Yeah, wow, this is an interesting submission, Andrew. Thank you. I just want to clarify a couple of things that we do agree with you on. LNG is more carbon intensive than coal, and that is something that this government is proposing to bring in. So they're going to bring in one of the most carbon polluting options there is, compressed, liquid natural gas. And also your point that, what was the other point you made that I did agree with for a brief moment? I wanted to ask you a question that you talk about these actions being driven by ideology, not science. What strikes me is that your position is driven by ideology, not science, insofar as you're denying the science of climate change, which very clearly says we need to stop burning all fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal. And furthermore,
Steve Abel, I just asked you to ask a question.
My question is,
if you don't agree with the submitter, it doesn't mean you start making political statements. Can you ask a question?
Yes. Do you disagree with the position of the International Energy Agency, which says that we have to leave we have to have no new exploration or extraction of oil, gas, and coal by 2021 if we are to achieve climate targets. That's the International Energy Agency who say that.
Yeah, that certainly is. And if they mean that we've got to burn bitumen and oil and dig up oil...
They don't mean that, and you know it.
Well, what reserves are they talking about? Because they also include oil in their forecast.
Yeah, they're saying we need to have no new exploration or extraction of new oil, gas, and coal by 2021.
Well, that only leaves you with the stuff that we've found, and you know that if they've got oil in their forward forecasts, it doesn't gel. So, look, I agree with you completely. You know, we have a transition that we've got to make, and we've got to navigate that transition, and you've got to do it according to the laws of thermodynamics and physics.
And my follow-up
there is no way around it. So our position is actually that there is no, you know, in terms of New Zealand's production of indigenous fuels to fuel New Zealand, you know, it just doesn't make sense from a climate perspective to be importing those.
My follow-up is that you say cheap energy underpins New Zealand's standard of living. Do you acknowledge that what makes the energy expensive is the fossil fuel component? It is under our spot marketing system, the gas and the coal, that drives up the cost of the energy, because the cheapest forms of energy in this country are the renewable forms.
On what basis?
I mean, are you saying that hydro
is that on the basis
not...
of LCOE, levelized cost of energy?
You understand how the spot market works?
I do. So
yes. And you accept that the cheapest form of electricity in this country is that generated by hydro?
Correct, as long as it's built, constructed hydro.
This is a line from you. You say energy underpins New Zealand's standard of living.
Finish the answer before you, if you have a supplementary, you put it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah. So I will go to Helen White now.
Thank you. I'd like to know your position on whether you think that companies that take out fossil fuels, mine, should actually be restoring the situation rather than, at the moment we have a bond so that there is a guarantee that they'll be restored. Do you think it's acceptable when we have situations where in fact companies go under or sell to another company and then it goes under, and the New Zealand taxpayer ends up paying that price?
I think that's, you know, what the legal position at the moment reflects.
The change proposed here is that, in fact, that won't happen anymore. There will be no bond. And so companies will be able to do what they have done in the past, which is sell to another company, and then that company goes under, and the New Zealand taxpayers had to fork out millions of dollars as a consequence. Do you expect that you have a duty to clean up your mess?
Indeed, I think all companies have a duty, you know, have a need to clean up, clean up any impact that they've had. I do believe that the current proposals don't remove the financial hurdles that are required to be proved, before anybody gets involved. So,
do you accept we're going back to the position that we were in the law when we had a disaster of this kind, and the New Zealand taxpayer has had to pay $434 million because of it?
I believe that the changes that were made will remain that require companies to be financially able to fulfil their decommissioning costs.
Which was not the case before.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for your submission. Thank you for answering.
I have a question based on that. Are they reversing legislation that means that oil companies have to have the means to be able to clean up their own mess? Is that what National's looking at doing? Because that's really bad if that's the case.
Well, I mean, the point is that I could answer that in the sense that the mess is actually an exception rather than the rule. I mean,
but $430 million in cleanup.
All oil and gas exploration systems, right? They have built-in safety systems, and it's those who do not comply with them in shoddiness and irresponsibility, then they have to do the cleanup. Again, it's that one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch apples rule.
I know, but this is why it's important to put legislation in so we can prevent more apples from rotting.
Exactly. Agree with that. But then the point is that you have so much regulations, right? That you stifle even the equipment. I mean, I can imagine Sam looking into this machine, is it made from tungsten steel? Or, I mean, you can create hundreds of bureaucratic procedures, and by the time the German investor brings that machine over, he said, all right, we have lost $3 million. Thanks to Sam.
Yeah. Now, here's something that Tawhiri brought up. So, Christchurch earthquake, liquefaction. The petrol stations that had the backup generators, you couldn't enter the site of the petrol station because of the live electricity with the water, because the backup, every time you cut the mains power off, the backup generator kicked on.
I have really got to talk about the Tui project. I think that's really important because they're still here in New Zealand. They're just trading under a different name now, Matahio. They've still got the same executives and people like that involved in that company. They recently tried to apply for a $38 million tax rebate. That's on top of $330 million it's costing the taxpayer to clean up after them.
Are they using that $38 million rebate for further mining explorations to create jobs, or
they haven't stated what they're going to use it for?
Right.
So it could be getting paid as dividends to their shareholders.
Yes.
Okay.
Which means that doesn't create jobs.
Well, we have to evaluate that further. I mean, again, it's a good point that you brought up, and I think I agree with your point of view in the sense that we really do have to have all these safety catches in place. I mean, we don't want to have oil dripping off everywhere in the coast and these poor penguins dying and all that. But we kind of go and then make a generalization, right? I mean, we can agree with that, or we can disagree, but we can also agree with the fact that we can't make a generalization to say, oops, as a result of all oil, gas, exploration companies, including Shell, Esso, our British counterparts who wants to put money in, or Aussie gas, they are all having these very bad. If so, I think all of them will be sacked. There'll be no more.
Yeah, I mean, you are correct when you say that not all the oil companies are doing this. I don't know about the gentleman that just spoke before, but I do know about this company that has 6 permits in the Taranaki Basin. They can still drill even after doing all of that, even with the legislation in place. And that's really bad. They shouldn't be allowed to continue in New Zealand. They're bad business people.
You're talking about the Tui people, the Tui owners.
Yeah, Tamarind, yes.
And is there any real evidential side of what Helen White said of 430 million, which we Kiwis had to fork up through the tax to pay for it, or did the Tuis paid some for it? I mean,
I got that information from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment.
Right, which was created by the previous Labour government. I mean,
no, it was not created by the previous Labour government. It was created by the previous national government by merging 3 separate departments into what became MB.
What I meant is the provisions set in place on all the extra bureaucratic procedures in the current, previous MBIE, with so many rules and regulations. Was it not developed by the Labour 6 years? No,
MB came as a government department in about 2011 or 12, and I do know one of the departments that was merged into it was WorkSafe New Zealand.
Oh, right. So
it was. It happened. It was deemed a super ministry set up to save money.
Oh,
the problem is it hasn't exactly done. I do know in MB, another thing they also do is visa applications for work permit holders, business visas, residencies.
They
are. Because I know a former boss of mine. Her job is to do business visa applications at MB in the process of going through that before sending it off to Immigration New Zealand, where an immigration officer goes yes or no.
Right.
Yeah, no, the MB does do a lot of things in there, and yeah, MB has been around for quite a number of years. I think Stephen Joyce might have been the first minister, but I'm not 100% certain.
Right. So, I mean, in the sense that I think collapsing or, merging so many disparate and diverse areas, immigration, visas, business, you name it, into one large gargantuan department may have not seen any real positives, isn't it? Because it becomes a bloated bureaucracy. So maybe they should devolve into separate, efficiently run like Lux.
Yeah, but it's what is the replacement plan? Is the big question. I mean, you know, you can devolve it. You can devolve an organisation down, but you've got to have a replacement plan. Like, I know there are people out there who want to see MSD shut down because they're a bad government department. But until you have a replacement plan in place, you need to actually sometimes have to keep them there, especially when they've got some very vital functions in society. And MB is one that does provide a lot of vital functions. In order to, say, devolve MB, it possibly could take 2 terms to actually go for a proper process to devolve MB. It wouldn't be something you could do on overnight. I do know the IRD new computer system they had, that got started, the $1 billion upgrade on the IRD's infrastructure started under the then Minister of Revenue, Peter Dunn. And I mean, this was back in 2012, the starting process of it. The transition part didn't start till 2016, and it took until 2022 before it finished.
I think they should make it into maybe 2 or 3 separate entities, because they are kind of not really like interlinked or synchronized. It's something like climate and environment is kind of synchronized.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things.
Environment is like, so maybe if they had a smaller, more efficiently run, departments focused on business, environment, and innovations.
We're going to move on to the next segment of the Arms, Shooting Clubs, Shooting Ranges and Other Matters Amendment Bill, because I believe this is a very important bill that needs to be put on there. So let's see good old Nicole McKee, who lives in Haitaitai in the Rongotai electorate.
I nominate the Justice Committee to consider the bill, and at the appropriate time I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by 4 months and 1 day after the bill has received its first reading. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to be in the House today speaking about this bill. This bill forms phase 2 of the government's 4-phased approach to firearms reform. Mr. Speaker, shooting clubs and ranges play an important public safety role in our communities. They are places for people to learn how to operate and handle firearms safely, as well as to practice and to compete. Amendments made to the Arms Act 1983 in 2020 changed the way that clubs and ranges were regulated. Clubs are now required to be approved and ranges certified. These new requirements came at an increased cost and time commitment for operators, many of whom are volunteers. Some of these changes have been positive, but others have gone way beyond what is necessary for public safety. And we are now at risk of losing safe venues for licence holders to use firearms safely due to overly burdensome regulatory requirements. This bill will simplify the regulation of pistol and non-pistol clubs and ranges and ease the burden on operators without negatively impacting public safety outcomes. Mr. Speaker, this bill amends Part 6 of the Act to improve how clubs and ranges are regulated. The changes will ease the burden on clubs and range operators while continuing to enhance public safety outcomes. The first amendment relates to pistol clubs and ranges. The bill maintains the current regulatory requirements, recognising the higher regulatory standards associated with pistols, but will streamline the annual reporting requirements. This change will avoid unnecessary duplication of administrative activities and reduce the time operators spend on requirements that do not enhance public safety. The bill will also amend some regulatory requirements that apply to non-pistol clubs and ranges. This is to reduce the compliance burden on operators where there is no tangible benefit to public safety. Firstly, the bill will introduce a streamlined enrolment system to replace the current approval and certification system for non-pistol clubs and ranges. These enrolment systems are designed to ensure that the regulator has the information necessary to ensure public safety, while reducing excessive costs for the operators and making compliance more straightforward. The second change is related to incorporation requirements. Currently, non-pistol clubs are required to be incorporated if they sell ammunition and firearms. The bill proposes that non-pistol clubs will not need to be incorporated if all ammunition sold on behalf of the club is used on the day of the sale and at the club range. They are not to be taken off the premises. The bill will also support the ability for clubs to establish and operate temporary non-pistol ranges to host club events, providing that the regulator is notified. This is particularly good news for clubs hosting large national, regional or international competitions. And finally, the bill will provide certainty about when compliance inspections for both pistol and non-pistol clubs and ranges can occur. It will clarify the role of the regulator in encouraging compliance for non-pistol clubs and the powers for monitoring and enforcement in relation to non-pistol ranges. These changes will ensure that clubs and ranges are not unduly burdened with compliance requirements while incentivising operators to maintain high safety standards. Further amendments to requirements agreed to by Cabinet earlier this year will be made by order in council to the regulations once the bill is passed. For example, amendments will be made to the annual 12-event participation requirement for pistol endorsement holders. Once these regulations are in place, attendance at any organised shooting event in the host club's calendar will count towards these 12 annual shoots. Currently, only those undertaken at the pistol shooter's home club count, which was nonsensical considering pistol shooters regularly travel to compete. In addition, the bill contains provisions to reflect Cabinet's decision to transfer the administrative function for the Act from police to the Justice portfolio. To reflect this, the bill will provide me with regulation-making powers to recommend policy changes to Cabinet as we progress the reform. I will carry out public consultation in accordance with Section 74(4) of the Act before seeking Cabinet's endorsement on any policy changes. Mr. Speaker, it is important that we have firearms laws that improve public safety, are practical and make compliance straightforward. These laws should also support clubs and ranges to continue to operate safe and controlled environments where people can learn about firearms, practice firearms safely and compete. I look forward to hearing from New Zealanders across the country through the Select Committee process, and I hope everyone takes this opportunity to have their voices heard. Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
I mean, I'm not a gun owner. I have shot guns before, but I'm not a gun owner. My question to Nicole McKean, I hope this does get brought up, is what is in the current legislation that prevents gun clubs from operating safely? Is it more of a red tape thing that they're unable to have as much liberty in the club as they would like? Or because I don't know, she hasn't really brought up anything there that relates directly to gun safety, like what problems were with the previous legislation.
I found quite interesting was the fact that now incorporated, now I'm not sure if that means either a limited liability company or the non-profit equivalent, an incorporated society, for selling ammunition that has to be used on the day. That was quite an intriguing thing in there. I don't know enough to comment, but that was something that was interesting to actually hear, even that, you should only be selling ammunition to licensed firearm owners.
I mean, I think the part that although I'm a center-right person, I feel that law and order is important, and I don't see why gun hobbyists, would want to have assault rifles. That is the part that is really concerning for me in terms of safety and security from law and order perspective, because there's nothing wrong with the hobbies owning guns legally and having fun and showing off each other's guns. Lobbyists do that. You can show off your sports car, you can show off your angling, how big the fish is, by all means, okay, of whatever culture, gender. The thing is that why would you need assault rifles? And then when you have them legally in your home, all you need is word getting around, and some really bad gang guys just raid your home to get these guns for obvious reasons. And then so we open up that whole Pandora box of security. So I don't agree that even assault rifles should be allowed, because the automatic, what do you call it? The
semi-automatics.
You can shoot a few thousand rounds in the God knows how many.
Well, it's a bit extreme what you're saying there, but yes.
So do they have that? Do they have that in gun ranges?
No.
No. The weapon you've described is a war weapon.
Yes, it's a war. I mean, are people allowed to own that? Gun owners?
No. So that's the thing that Nicole has been stating. She said that no, you won't be able to buy these big magazine clips that you can expand, the amount of bullets that your AR-15 has. Now, I just want to preface that there is a use. Yeah, so there is a practical use for AR-15s. I live in a farming community. People that do pest control often need to use an AR-15 to get the job done. However, the people that can do that, they're licensed contractors, right? I don't know. Yeah, and so I would like to see some changes to legislation. Like I would like to see like a registered.
I do know Nicole McKee is looking at. I'm not sure when it will happen, but it was a progressive licensing system for firearms that operate. From what it was described, it would operate similar to a progressive driver's license system that we currently use.
Yeah.
Are those firearms going to be registered under the system?
Yeah. I doubt it. No, she doesn't trust the police to hold the register.
So that's a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because that's the thing with firearms is the fact that at the moment there is no registration requirement. I don't know what the guts is with the storage requirement. I remember what the ATC storage requirements were for the firearms,
right?
And we had an addition that was excess to the regulation, but all ammunition was stored off-site at the unit commander's house. So the guns were on site at ATC, but the ammunition was at the unit commander's house, which in that particular case was a hour's drive. Well, it could take up to an hour to get to his house from where it was at the time. It's a bit quicker now because they have an expressway, but they didn't have that back then. So that was a step taking place. But you can store your ammunition legally next to your guns. And in one aspect, it makes sense to store it in the same gun safe in one aspect, if it's safe. But, if it gets broken into, like, I remember that was something at ATC on firearms training and security, was the fact that you always store your ammunition separately in a separate secured safe to your guns.
That's right.
That was drummed into our heads from year one of ATC. And it would have been the same for the Army version of the cadets, same with the Navy version. It was a very standard thing that was said to us for gun safety.
So I'm just asking a question rather than anything else. So am I to understand that Nicole McKee has put into law that assault rifles are banned? Means automatic. What do you call it? The one that shoots.
Semi-automatic weapons.
Is that banned? Means we are not allowed to have that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if she and yourself hold the same view.
Well, I mean, then that's great. I think that's a good thing she has done. See, well, okay, she's a hobbyist, and I'm not sure whether she's a lobbyist, but the fact that
everyone questions her on things she stands for. Yes.
Yeah.
So, should we move over to Ginny Anderson to hear her speech?
Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
Terrorist practiced on a gun range in Dunedin. He didn't break any rules and no one went to the police. At that stage in New Zealand's history, pistol clubs were lightly regulated and non-pistol clubs were self-regulated. In the aftermath of his killing of 51 people, regulations for clubs and ranges were tightened up right across New Zealand. There was a consistent standard nationwide. This was to ensure public safety and to ensure the safety of those who used guns on ranges. The Firearms Safety Authority had oversight of pistol and non-pistol ranges. What we do know is once they did get oversight, that 267 safety improvement notices were issued to the the pistol clubs for failing to meet safety standards in the past. This would be to do with ballistics. So if they were shooting in areas where people could be horse riding or bike riding, they had to make improvements to change those ranges to make them safe. Let's remember that is for the pistol ranges. The non-pistol are still under review. That work has not been done for the non-pistol ranges. So this crucial information, that 267 improvement notices were issued by police, did not make it into the Cabinet paper which made these decisions. Nicole McKee, and it's been published in the Herald, stated that she did not provide that new Cabinet paper, and she said to Cabinet that there was nothing to indicate that any safety issues under the previous system, and she failed to include the information about the 267 improvement notices that have been issued. That vital information was missing from the Cabinet paper that made the decision to deregulate gun ranges in New Zealand that we are now considering, and that is a very serious concern for all New Zealanders and our police service who are in line for dealing with this and mopping up. Nicole McKee is unwinding all this, and the reason is that there is a risk, and the risk is that gun ranges could close, that this level of regulation might close gun ranges, and that's a real concern. The Ministry of Justice and the Regulatory Impact Statement have been very clear in stating that this is an assumption. There is absolutely no information or no evidence to demonstrate that this is a realistic threat. The proposals in this legislation try to give the impression that there is regulatory oversight, but severely undermine the ability of New Zealand Police to regulate and monitor and enforce the safety at shooting clubs and ranges. There are no compliance tools of any kind, no penalty provisions and for refusing access to inspect ranges. The public and law-abiding users of shooting ranges can have absolutely no confidence that the range in their neighbourhood is operating safely. The bill is also half the story, Mr Chair, as all the other work goes on in the regulations. There is a complete lack of detail about how the new enrolment system will work. It is assumed it will be spelled out in the technical regulations, which we are yet to see. This takes us back to pre-2019. And on top of this, there is a new requirement, a new pop-up rifle range that can be enrolled and certified if they hold only 2 events a year. The bill only states that police must be notified and gives police no follow-up powers of inspection or certification. The Wild West is coming to a backyard near you, ladies and gentlemen. There is nothing in the bill to specify the format that police must be notified, and it is assumed that this detail is yet to come. I'll conclude, Mr Chair, by talking about the consultation. The regulatory impact statement states that the consultation was rushed, it was skewed towards the firearms users, with 91% of submissions coming from firearms groups. What other sector in New Zealand gets to write its own safety rules like this? It wouldn't happen in maritime or rail or any other recreational sport or area. Well, this is firearms we're talking about as well. 91% of submissions came from the firearms community. There are 230,000 licence holders, which is around 4% of the population. And the minister responsible for all of this work is a member of the Wellington branch of the Deerstalkers Association, which makes her automatically a member of COLFO. And so what we have is a member of a coalition of licensed firearm owners writing the rules and regulations for ranges in New Zealand that only cater to that firearms community. The safety of New Zealanders, the safety of our communities are coming second. The gun lobby and gun mates are being put ahead of our communities, and it's time we called it out loud and clear.
Nicole McKee's association with COLFO is very concerning to me. That's how she entered in public life, was as a lobbyist for that organisation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But we do have the safety provisions, right? That we don't allow the ARs. So,
from what Ginny's just sat there and said was that you can have a pop-up gun range set up, and all you got to tell is the police what you're doing. Now, put it this way: if you want a pop-up liquor license venue, the police have more power, by the sounds of what Ginny Anderson has just described.
So do they have less powers, or
so the police, but from what Ginny is describing with the bill, the police would have less power. So currently, if you have a special temporary license to sell alcohol, say at a Newtown Festival, for example, that's something that happens in my backyard. You have to get a special license. The police can come onto your site and inspect you anytime. From what's been described on there, you want to tell the police you're setting it up, but you can't actually sit down there and have the police come in and inspect you.
Oh, okay.
That is actually, you need something of the ability to have inspections of some sort, or a checks and balance that ain't internal, because you're dealing with,
So, we inspected ourselves. And it's like, no, you got to have an independent outside organisation do that for you.
Right. Yeah. So if you're seen as independent, and you can't self-regulate something that you might not regulate so well yourself, especially when it comes to weapons.
Or when people's lives could be at stake.
That's right. I would say I would not be for that kind of situation where there needs to be some aspect where police is allowed to go into. Well, they are not having gang patches, right? So, but to kind of
they could have gang patches going on to shooting ranges. That could happen.
It's possible, and I think it's good that you allow the police to have they are allowed to have a look inside, because you can't have ammunition. Okay, fair enough. The provisions where ammunition is to be used is to make sure ammunition don't be left lying around and go into the wrong hands. I agree with that, but why have those technicalities when you just need to make sure you have the necessary, not bureaucratic regulations, but safety regulations?
Did you just a question, if I may, to Dr. Eric, did you read the open letter to from the Police Association? Because I think that might be quite an insightful read to go over.
I'll have a look at that. Yes.
Yes. I highly recommend looking at that.
Because didn't Nicole McKee try to exclude the Police Association from consultation?
Yeah, I mean, Colfo dismissed them as being nonsense. Dismissed the president of the association.
Oh, well, Chris Cahill.
Yeah.
God.
I'll have a look at that. Yes.
Let's do 3 speeches back to back because they're short ones.
Yep. Okay.
And then we'll get off to submissions. Submissions closing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Chair of the Justice Committee, I'm sure the whole committee looks forward to considering this bill when it comes through to us shortly. Mr. Speaker, the bill is a pretty straightforward bill. It is aiming to improve the safety and compliance of firearms regulation on shooting clubs and shooting ranges. I think some of the rhetoric that we've heard already in the first couple of speeches is going to be entirely unhelpful as we consider this bill over the next 4 months. And I would caution all members who are making contributions to be somewhat more considerate in their viewpoints and the allegations that are being made around here. The last thing we need is to heighten the debate on these issues with miscellaneous and somewhat outrageous accusations. So as the Chair of the Committee, I look forward to hearing the submissions on this bill. I would encourage, as I have mentioned previously, for all those who are out there listening who are making submissions, to use the formal process, to use the parliamentary website so that we can process these submissions in a timely and orderly manner. I look forward to the debate on this as it goes through, and I commend the bill to the House.
Tanya Unkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to give a small contribution in support of the Arms Shooting Clubs, Shooting Ranges and Other Matters Amendment Bill in the name of the Honourable the member who has actually just left. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, I must admit, is something that is brought me back to thinking of growing up on the farm, when for us growing up there were no rules and regulations. We went out and found a tree and we saw a few accidents at the time, but it is now time for a safe and controlled environment. And what this bill will do is amend legislation which will relate to the clubs and ranges, and it will also redefine some things, being pistol shooting and non-pistol shooting ranges. So some of these amendments, Mr. Speaker, we see are just common sense, and they will ensure to help to reduce any gun-related accidents. It's also, as the Speaker who was introducing the bill said, is there a tangible benefit to public safety by having this in legislation? And I see that that is a good question to ask when legislation is being made. So I will keep this short, Mr. Speaker, and on behalth of New Zealand First, commend the bill to the House. Thank you.
I wish Nicole McKee asked herself that question.
Not read quite so much of her speeches in the future. It's just you're a good speaker and get some confidence about leaving those notes behind. Maria Mino Kapakini.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Kia ora tātou katoa. It is a public safety issue. It's a huge public safety issue. But if you don't talk to the public, then you're not going to understand and know what's going on. Going just to the guys or the gals that, you know, have a holster and love the gun and talk about that and worship it and so on, you're not going to understand the real issues that go on in the minds of families, regular families that live in regular streets, that want to feel and know that they are safe from this kind of legislation. Now, the loosening of it, I mean, it's not, this is the loosening of regulations has to be a huge concern for every single person in this House. And to dismiss it as if, well, you know, the gun lobbyist knows what she's talking about, so let's just let him make those decisions, shall we? That is a huge risk, that is negligent, and wake up to that fact. Tātou, wake up to it. It's a gun, right? Why? So it might have been middle of last year, Mr. Speaker, we had a gentleman roll into, two of our whānau going to check out a house in Whangarei, in the Whangarei Heads area, ended up being shot by the gentleman that was living in that house. Now, from what I understand, nobody, I mean, he seemed like a regular guy, you know, so regular. They arrived, check out the facility, shot the mother, shot the daughter, burnt the house down, and he died. So these very current and real and tragic stories are in the minds and in the fear of people and families and whānau and their mokopuna that want to feel safe. And this kind of legislation, loosening of these regulations, is negligent, and it'll be detrimental. And we completely object and oppose it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean,
I was not expecting that.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of my mate who works as a police officer, just to keep respect his privacy. I'm not going to state his name or anything, but he's worked as a liaison officer and he's had guns pulled out on him. You know, it happens. This, you know, people bringing out sawn out shotguns and, you know, pistols, and yeah, people do crazy stuff with guns.
Yeah, I know that 4 years working in the farm areas, driving 1,000 kilometers up and down, from Hamilton up to Kaitaia, Kerikeri. You know, when you go to any farming home to talk about their insurance, you always show that, you know, you are a nice guy with a coat, okay? Because sometimes they can get very protective. I can understand, you know, they may have had a few cows stolen, and if you have the wrong person there, they might get the wrong idea that, you know, oops, you're there to appropriate their things. You're not a salesman or something. So, yeah, it's good to have some understanding of that. So, in that situation, unfortunately, maybe the guy was shaped in his mind that, oops, you came from another culture, equals to a gang member, equals to I have to shoot you, that kind of thing. So it's dangerous, that kind of thinking. So I mean, it's great to also understand the concerns of public safety. I think I'm not clear why what's this gun club amendment thing about. I mean, to me, it's
adjusting regulations.
Yeah, no big issue if police were to go, hey, Mike, I just want to have a look to make sure that you got your guns all locked up, and ammunition racks, and with maybe a special code that only like this is just normal. Where some countries they allow where the police doesn't go in with a SWAT team because you are a legal gun range making money for gun licensed people. They're allowed to go in, just have a look. All right, everything's good, mate, up to scratch. It's not like an official inspector.
Like what you can do with bars.
Yeah. All right, good. All right, you got it.
The police can legally do that currently in any liquor license establishment, walk in as they please.
So you mean to say that this legislation will mean police can't do that anymore?
I don't know about that for gun ranges, but I do know this isn't amending liquor legislation that does that I know of, where police can walk in as they please.
Yeah. So if they amend this one, that means police can't do that. They have to.
Well, I think they're trying to stop police from doing it, from what we're gathering, from what we're hearing here.
Self-governing.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's get to this. Let's get submissions that are coming up out of here. No, it's not government-based, but hey, do you really want to pay a $4.30 toll on the Manawatu-Taranora Highway to replace the flat Manawatu Gorge Road? Submissions close tomorrow. The gun arms shooting club, shooting range, and other matters amendment bill closes on Tuesday, the 29th of October. The District Court District Court Judges Amendment Bill closes Tuesday the 29th. We'll be talking about that with the 8 p.m. show tonight. The Social Workers Registration Amendment Bill closes tonight at just before midnight. The Taxation's annual rates for 2024-2025 Emergency Response and Remedial Measures Bill closes on Wednesday the 9th of October. The Marine Coastal Area Takutai Moana Customary Marine Titles Amendment Bill closes Tuesday the 15th of October, the great day when the MPs are back in Parliament. And the Regulatory Systems Primary Industries Amendment Bill closes Friday the 18th of October. And here's something just to put a little bit of context of how things are going. As you will see on here, this is showing how close we are to getting to partnership. If we hit 3,000 public watched hours and 500 subscribers, we can go and introduce things called super chats.
Sorry. I just wanted to put out a final message before we close up for today. I really appreciate having Eric come on the show. I really enjoy talking to you, Eric, even though we've got opposing political opinions, because I think it's really important to debate these issues.
Yes,
and I think it's awesome to have you come on as an interlocutor.
Yeah, it's good too. At least
it's always entertaining, and it's great having people push back, even if there are sometimes times where I probably would sit there and say, can we just move on?
It makes the show interesting. I like it. It makes it
and put it this way. Anyone who wants to say Eric is our Damien Grant, no, sorry, that's an insult to Eric.
Yeah,
I'm very sure, Eric, you're not a convicted fraudster.
Anyway, guys, any one of you going? Are you going for the tonight's 8 p.m. show? Are you on too?
I'll be on there. Yep.
Yes, and I'll be on there, and we'll be joined with was it Nick Rani and what's his other name? We also know him as Frosty, but I'll just go and have a look at the run sheet. Levi, was it Reedy Rota?
Right, okay. Well, I mean, just to share, I mean, my research on anti-hate crime, I work a lot with the German police, and a lot of things start from just having access to guns. People who are not gun owners having access to guns, and America is full of these cases. A jilted someone goes and kills 30 students in a class because the girl didn't want to go out for a date with him, that kind of thing. I mean, there are many of these crazy cases. And all of the research I did with the German government for the hate crime thing was all based on gun safety. Yeah, and as a counselor in Singapore, we also see on drug rehabilitation, but with police, and do the health checks in the prison for prisoner conditions in the big prisons. We also find that the danger is always gun safety, and gangs, and when you have access to guns illegally, we are not a responsible farming guy killing possums that kill all your feet and all that. That's the danger to the community. Not because of the gun owner, because of those who get access to the guns they have. So it's very important for police to check where they keep the guns, keep the ammunition separate. And today's way of locking, which we have a habit of doing in farms, where you just have a lock like that. Now, actually, it's good to have an encased steel one with the coat, like a safe, a real safe, and the bad guys can't get access to it. So, yeah, I'm quite surprised that we are allowing gun to self-regulate. So. There goes the center part of me.
Yeah. Well, we're going to call it there. See our audience back at 8 p.m. for the order paper. And, hopefully next week we don't have to have an urgency show, but we will see if we can cover more of the Select Committee hearings on the Crown Minerals Amendment Bill.
Right.
Awesome.
Okay.
I'll catch you guys later.
So, see you at 8 o'clock.
I'll listen in afterwards. Well, I'll watch the news or something. Okay, see you later tomorrow.
Thank you for watching the order paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/itsinthaballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by